Microsoft has killed off Skype. Skype was the first technology we used here at AVNation to connect people. So if you go back and listen to episode 0, you're listening to us connecting folks on Skype.
Skype and now Teams, they kind of do the same thing. So, on the one hand, it broadens our reach. It lets people know, hey, this is what we do. My 84-year-old mom doesn't think I sell TVs anymore. She's starting to get it,
I actually looked at my phone and went, do I even have Skype still on it? And I opened up the app and it sent me right over to my Teams account. Yep. I went, well, I guess I can kill that app off my phone.
His legacy will live on in our hearts for all eternity. Well, we ain't getting any deader. Back to work.
What the new HDMI spec means for Pro AV. Microsoft is shutting down Skype and looking at the different priorities of Teams and the rest of the AV industry. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 708, recorded Friday, March 14th, 2025. The Teams episode. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of the biggest AV news and information we have gathered. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information, first and foremost, from parts unknown, Dawn Mead. Welcome, ma'am.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. As usual, love coming here and talking with you and other folks.
Also with us out west, Mr. Garth Lobin from Atlona. Welcome, sir.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be back.
Thank you, sir. And also with us from our friends at Midwich US, Tony Fergali. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. First-time caller.
I got to hang out with Tony and our buddy Chris Netto at the CTI National Sales Meeting, where we had professional wrestling, and Mr. Fergali was very much into that, and it was very interesting. So,
incredible. It was incredible.
There are pictures somewhere, and if you find me at Infocom, there's pictures somewhere of me and Mr. Netto maybe or may not have been in the ring, and there may or may not have been a chair involved. Yes, it was. Chris and I got to really, reenact some very nice old school wrestling things. First story comes to us from our friends over at The Verge. Microsoft has killed off Skype. I'm going to pause here for a second. This makes me feel slightly old. Not the fact that I am 50 makes me feel old, but this makes me feel old. Skype was the first technology we used here at AVNation to connect people. So if you go back and listen to episode 0, quite frankly, all the way through probably the first year that you're listening to us connecting folks on Skype. So a little bit of sadness here. They have officially pulled the plug, actually pulling it on May 5th. Skype will be replaced by the free consumer version of Microsoft Teams, with users able to transition their message history, their contacts, and their group chats without creating a new account. However, one major feature will not make the jump. Microsoft is cutting support for calling landlines and mobile numbers. They're citing a shift in consumer habits toward VoIP and data-driven communication. Now, while this move signals Microsoft's full commitment to Teams, the company insists that Skype users remain in control with the option to export their data if they choose to move on to another platform. Skype's demise reflects a broader industry trend, one where traditional telephony takes a backseat to modern integrated collaboration tools. Don, we're going to start with you on this. Microsoft is now fully focused on Teams. Not that they haven't been for a while, but this kind of puts the kind of an exclamation point here. How does this shift impact the broader strategy for UC, for unified communications and collaborations when it comes to corporate AV environments?
Well, I kind of have mixed feelings about it, and it affects it a couple of ways. Much like COVID introduced the broader world that isn't in AV or the commercial world to the very idea of UC and of video conferencing and video calling beyond just FaceTiming their grandkids. Skype and now Teams, they kind of do the same thing. So, on the one hand, it broadens our reach. It lets people know, hey, this is what we do. And this is, if you have questions, my 84-year-old mom doesn't think I sell TVs anymore. She's starting to get it, longtime watchers of the show will know. Tim and I have discussed that many times, my mom. But, it's starting to give us more reach in the world. However, they're splitting their focus, I think, a little bit between the commercial and the consumer. And hopefully they have completely different teams no pun intended, working on those versions of the software or of the platform so that we don't lose any kind of support because, no offense, Microsoft folks, sometimes we need support because we run into roadblocks and problems. And my first thought reading this was, oh, well, the consumers now get to suffer the teams that we get to suffer at the office. Well, that was my second thought. My first thought was, oh, Skype, it went the way of GeoCities. So for those of us over a certain age. But yeah, I mixed feelings. I think it's good that it's spreading more awareness of unified communications and our technologies and what we do. But split focus can be problematic sometimes.
Garth, same kind of question. How does this impact kind of the broader UCC and environment that corporate is certainly moving towards, and even there's an aspect of higher education when it comes to hybrid learning and distance learning? First
of all, Skype, is that still a thing?
Not until May 5th. Yes, until May 5th it is.
I remember, so we moved from Office Communicator. They killed that for Link. In the background, they bought Skype, and then they dumped Skype on all of us, and then they dumped Teams on all of us, right? So we've been using this. So, first of all, I don't want to say, too bad, so sad for Skype. We have a vendor that we work with that uses Skype, and that's how we communicate with them. So in a world in which folks are still using it, and they're using that for communications, we had to help them move over to this new version of Teams. Here's the catch. They're not within our organization. Now, Don doesn't know anything about what happens when they're not in your organization, but they weren't in our organization. So in order to communicate with our vendor, we have to have a personal version of Teams to communicate with them because their teams and our team can't talk to each other. So Don talks about, support. This is everything. How are we going to have these kind of unified communications if they're not? Now, as far as education and all the rest, this just creates a situation in which a change is going to create, and there has to be change management within the environment. I don't know that it's that big of a deal, only because when you were still using Skype, what were you using it for? Maybe you were still using it for calls. I think they cut that off towards the end of last year and all the credits went away. And when Skype was a thing, cell phone calls were expensive and international calls were prohibitive. Now, however, we have that capability. It's very easy to pick up your cell phone and call your contacts in Europe, but also we have WhatsApp. So you can make a direct call on WhatsApp. I know a lot of people, our European team is like all on WhatsApp. So when we go out to the show in Barcelona, I go from my phone to WhatsApp all the time. So I don't know how much it's going to be missed. I don't know how much of a change management has to happen in those environments. Zoom does an incredible job if you're not willing to use Teams. And so these are great platforms that most of the schools, universities, and businesses, they all have their preferred UC platform, and there just wasn't room for Skype anymore. And when we started talking about this, when you sent us the stories, I actually looked at my phone and went, do I even have Skype still on it? And I opened up the app and it sent me right over to my Teams account. I went, well, I guess I can kill that app off my phone.
Now, Garth brings up a great point, though, is the not just the cross-platform, but being able to talk outside of your island. And believe me, I live on a very exclusive island, so to speak. We can't talk to outside people using our Teams unless they send us the invite and they're on some magic approved list. Otherwise, we got to go to Zoom. And so there is no single platform because we have to have that flexibility. So very good point, Garth.
All right, Tony. One of the things that Microsoft is doing is they are trying to position Teams, quite frankly, as a center for AI-driven collaboration. Okay, so what sort of AI features, innovations, techniques would make an IT or an AV decision maker, director, user see this as the next generation of enterprise communication?
Bundling it with some sort of meeting note software or something that, can scribe what you're talking to with your coworkers, like on a day-to-day basis. I think we've sort of become in this world where we're inundated with meetings, where I have more meetings than ever normally. And half the time, if I'm not taking notes, I'm a paper and pen guy. I'm dead in the water by the end of the day if I don't remember it. So I've been on calls where people have used like third-party software, and I've been on calls where people have the co-pilot feature enabled, but to Don's point, a lot of it's still not federated. Like, I have a feeling if I were on a call with you, Don, I wouldn't be able to turn on any sort of meeting note taker. So it's an interesting place for them to be because, you know, from a security standpoint and a federation standpoint, like how are these features actually going to be used? You know, I'm always so genuinely curious as to where Microsoft is thinking and placing their bets. Like I know they tried to inquire about buying Discord a while back. Was that a play in the consumer market to sort of have that international chat app, or are they trying to make Teams on the consumer side be that international chat app? But on the corporate side, it's a net positive that they're moving away from Skype, but I still think they need to sort of figure out what the path forward looks like. It's become like a tool in my sales kit. You know, I meet a new contact, I add them to Teams. IM starts from there. I end up, you know, then cell phone, and I get to know people better through Teams. But I've noticed now people getting cracked down on. Like some of my partners are now federated to where I can't message them. So it's a confusing outlook, but I think it's the right move shutting it down, and how AI plays into it. That's going to be, they're going to experiment a little bit.
Well, we're recording this on the 14th of March. By the time you hear this, I will be in Orlando at Enterprise Connect, which Microsoft has a couple of announcements. Ilya is doing a keynote at Enterprise Connect this week, but again, by the time you hear this. So it will be interesting. I know that some of those announcements will certainly be AI-driven, including some translation features that they've been touting and playing around with. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. Next story comes to us from our friends over at AV Network. HDMI 2.2 has officially arrived, bringing with it, quote unquote, improvements to bandwidth, refresh rates, and overall performance. It's supposed to impact, quite frankly, almost every corner of the pro AV industry. This new standard doubles the data rate to 96 gigabits per second, enabling uncompressed 8K at 60 hertz, 10K at 120 hertz, and ultra high refresh rates that are a significant improvement for esports, digital signage, and high-end displays. According to SCN, quote unquote, HDMI 2.2 isn't just an upgrade, it's the new foundation for next generation AV technology. With widespread adoption expected over the next few years, AV decision makers should prepare now for a future where higher resolutions, smoother video, and seamless audio synchronization are the norm via an HDMI cable. Mr. Garth, we're going to pick on you because you are the manufacturer here. New technology, all of this jazz, and some of us have been around here long enough to once HDMI announces a new spec, it's a couple of years. But what does this new upgrade mean for the use case or viability of just HDMI in general?
I have a couple opinions, and I'll start with the manufacturer one, and then I'm going to take off my manufacturer's hat. First of all, they announced this at CES, and they also announced it at the same time as VESA announced DisplayPort 2.1b, which I'll get to in just a second. But all we have right now as manufacturers is the press release. There's a lot of good features, there's a lot of good capability that's put into it, but as of this morning, as we went to tape, there are no specs posted yet for manufacturers. So they've promised those probably sometime here within Q2 that we'll see those specifications. To your point, Tim, there are no more simple products. There are no more simple projects. Putting HDMI 2.2 into products is going to be a 24-month, maybe 36-month process,
Ooh. Right?
And, well, just think about it. The spec isn't out yet.
Yeah.
Silicon's not out. Go back to when, HDCP 2.2 came out and how long it was to get that out. So it's going to take a long time for manufacturers to put these into products. And we have to figure out where the use cases are, to your point. And let's talk about that for a minute. HDMI 2.1 is, the pipe, as you said, is 96. Ultra 96 going into 2.2. Fine, great. We have 2.1 now, and think about what that covers, all right? We have 8K 60 covered by that. We have 4K 120 covered by that. So let's talk about use cases in the meeting room. What do we have in the meeting room that's going to require anything more than what we have today? I think very complex displays. So think medical, right? So that you can get down and really see what's happening in a brain scan and that sort of thing. The new technologies that they talked about in the press release, I think there's a case for that. Again, taking my manufacturer's hat off, and I think about my living room. All right, I've got a 4K TV. I've not invested in an 8K TV. Maybe you have. Nope. But in my case, there really isn't anything streaming networks. We have 4K today if you download and look at the 4K signal. Think about gaming. All right. So the gamer on my team, she's a diehard gamer. Her PC is running DisplayPort because of the better bandwidth, better refresh that you have today. And getting back to VESA. All right. So as I said, they announced the update to DisplayPort 2.1b with a low loss cable. You have an 80 gig pipe. And this also releases the capability to now do a 3-meter cable, if I believe. So you get a greater distance. We don't know that if that's going to come to HDMI 2.2. Don't know that it isn't. We just don't have the full spec. Yeah. So when you look at what you could do today, DisplayPort has it covered. Now, AV manufacturer hat back on. What is the basis for USB-C today? DisplayPort. DisplayPort is the basis for USB-C that we're putting in our products today. In fact, we've made room in many of our products for USB-C by removing the DisplayPort connector. So right now, as we look at the use cases in the meeting rooms, what is everybody putting in their products? We're all talking about needing more USB-C. We're talking about needing to switch between more USB-C. We're seeing designs for products where there's multiple USB-C ports on there. HDMI isn't going to go away. It's a valid little 19-pin AV connector. It does a lot of things. But the world right now, as we sit here, wants to see more USB-C to get the charging capability, to get the control, the DisplayPort alt mode that we're using right now. So it's a wait and see approach. Let's see what the specs say when they come out. Let's see when the silicon comes out to put all this together. We have a while.
Tony, same question. Is what does, I mean, Garth makes a couple of really good points, and I almost want to ask, does USB-C make HDMI irrelevant? But Garth probably just answered that question. But so what does a new HDMI spec mean? Yeah,
Garth, I'm going to echo a lot of what you said, and I even have some questions for you, whether that's on here or offline. We've been playing this horse race of DisplayPort and HDMI just continually, jumping past each other for 10 years, where it's DisplayPort ups their bandwidth, HDMI ups their bandwidth, DisplayPort ups their bandwidth. And the one thing I always wonder is, why do we still use HDMI? Don't you have to pay a licensing fee for HDMI as well, whereas DisplayPort is an open standard as a manufacturer?
Yes, we do.
I was always so curious, so I didn't know if like you being on the manufacturer side, if you saw this as some upgrade, or is it just sort of are we getting to the point where we don't necessarily need all this bandwidth anymore, and maybe things are moving to USB-C? I don't know of anybody. I mean, maybe if you're doing some splitting or something over IP, that this could come in handy for the speed, but I don't necessarily know of a lot of rooms where you can really take advantage of 8K at 120, I think is the spec, and 4K at 240. Yeah. Sure, on the gaming side, I get it. I'm running my monitor at I think 165 hertz. I don't need any more, Plus, DisplayPort's got it covered, so I don't know. I don't want to be Mr. Negative Nelly over here. I don't see the point yet,
Don, I have a curveball to throw here to you, because one of the questions that kind of came out of this to me was, what does this do to the AV over IP conversation? And the reason I'm asking this is, in talking with both corporate folks, IT directors, as well as AV managers inside higher education, there are a number of them that haven't made the complete switch over to AV over IP, especially when it comes to singular rooms, right? They're more in the point-to-point. What does this spec do, if anything, to the conversation around, either migrating more towards AV over IP because of the higher bandwidth currently, or going to HDMI here if they're looking at point to point? What is this whole new spec thing do about the AV over IP conversation?
To me, and granted, I am not at all in higher ed, it tells me, yeah, we need to get to AV over IP because category cable is category cable. And then I won't have to mess around with which cable have I got, how many bandwidth does it have, which version is it? And those are all very important questions for the school, the higher ed market. I know within my own vertical and in my own company, we've been going way more towards the USB-C, like you said, Tim. That's really kind of replacing our HDMI use in a lot of our open spaces. And to be honest, in a lot of our closed spaces, manufacturers, Garth, pay attention, in a lot of our closed spaces, we can't use HDMI at all because one paper from one cybersecurity company somewhere found that the end of the HDMI cable can leak some info. So we have to use DisplayPort, and very possibly we'll get USB-C approved. Don't know yet, but try to find adapters that go CAT to DisplayPort. Everybody goes CAT to HDMI. And I think we found maybe one manufacturer that does the DisplayPort. So Garth, write that down.
Noted.
We're using a lot more DisplayPort and USB-C. So to me, it's like, improving the cable, great. When we use that, it'll be a great new thing. But and if I were schools or anybody not on AV over IP, I would get there because it is so much easier and such a benefit if you can get the right adapters and transmitter receivers. But yeah, it's kind of maybe I'll get a new cable when I get a new TV sort of thing for me.
Okay.
Tim, you also got to remember about AV over IP, right? You have the bandwidth issues there as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So, what compression algorithm are you going to use? What codec are you going to use? And then what will it look like on the other side? So not only are we going to have to wait for the spec to be finalized, we're also going to have to wait and see how will the codecs respond to all of that signal to put over AV over IP. So now you've got a little bit of development time after that as well.
Yeah, it'll be a minute, not just for the cables, but to Garth's point. So once the cables happen, then the compression algorithms will be able to get caught up. So yeah. Last story here. It comes to us from AV Magazine. Friend of the show, Tom Arpanaut. He also is one of the co-founders of Empowering Cloud. He was interviewed by AV Magazine about the different priorities of Teams and the pro AV industry. Specifically, Microsoft's push for simplicity. While Teams Rooms prioritizes ease of installation and scalability, AV professionals often focus on high-end multi-device setups. Arpanaut emphasized that customers ultimately seek cost-effective solutions that deliver maximum value, favoring quick deployments for most rooms while investing in premium setups for executive spaces. He also highlighted Microsoft's shift towards AI-driven business value, real-time translation in meetings, and an expanding Teams device ecosystem. Tom said the industry must balance flexibility, security, and user experience. Tony, Tom talked about this tension between AV professionals and Microsoft, quite frankly. How do we find the balance between quality and efficiency?
This is a tricky one. I think with sort of the advent of the bar in the room, it's made Microsoft really happy and a lot of money. Because now it is cheaper than ever for every customer to have a new license in some space, and they can get that recurring revenue. Yeah. So I totally understand why Microsoft is getting behind that. And the other thing I think about is, we talked about Teams a little bit earlier, and we all have our different opinions. The general consensus that I always feel is people have a pretty negative experience with Teams. The last thing that they want is there are more end users going into a room where the one-touch join doesn't work or the BYOD cable doesn't work. And then you have some of your users at whatever corporate or government organization saying, yep, Teams never works. It always stinks. Like, we're never going to get it. So from the Microsoft side, I do really get it. And I think that this kind of boils down to the manufacturer and how they need to sort of pave the way forward. I don't want any hot takes. I just think we're going to see a lot less programming in the coming years. We're going to see more and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Modular designs of spaces where, whether that's like a manufacturer's ecosystem or not, it's going to be more end user controlled and dependent. I think about manufacturers like Yealink, for example, is seeing a lot of success with their MVC kits, which is just a Microsoft controller, because anytime you add a piece, it just sort of pops up, and you don't need to hire a programmer or get into the weeds with it. So I think manufacturers are going to be pushing that direction, and I think hopefully Microsoft will come on board because of it. There's certainly tension there, though,
and it's almost like a Legoization of conference rooms, right? Where you're right, just put this block here and this block here, and we no longer need this because of whatever. Take this block away, return to office. Well, we've got these blocks, we'll put them over here, right?
Yeah, like have you seen that new Logitech, the new room sensor?
Yeah.
It's like this big.
Spot.
And you plop it on a wall. Spot, yeah, Logitech Spot. And like things like that, and that'll just tie right into whatever's in the room. So if you have a rally bar in the room, like that just ties right in, then you can instantly get reporting. So I think we're going to see more of that coming through. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though, to be completely honest with you.
Well, the nice thing about this particular program is we've got Tony, we've got Dawn, who's an end user, and Garth, who's a manufacturer. So we'll get to Garth in a second. Dawn, as the user, right? How do you balance the difference in that? Let's use the word that Tom used, tension, between the simplicity as well as having, let's say a full-featured system that may cost a little bit more and might be a little bit more, a little bit more complicated.
Well, simplicity is in the eye of the beholder. I think Tony said it pretty clearly there. How often do we have people in MTRs calling up the AV team saying, "Or it's not working, we can't make the call work, or it didn't log in, or whatever." And our AV guy will go up and it's an IT problem. So we have to send an IT guy up. Or the IT guy goes in and he finds it's a cable. I mean, there's just constantly this conflict. And to be honest, now that a lot of us end users are hiring AV people to join their teams, we have the background and the knowledge. We can design a conference room that's just as easy or easier to use without the MTR license and save money on the license. And if we have to have teams, put the device in device mode and have the room work great. And if there's a problem, it means somebody messed with a cable and our guy will go up and fix it. So it's to me, it's kind of a waste of money. I mean, Microsoft probably hates me for that, but there are people in my company that just adore MTRs. They want everything to be an MTR. They want, the world to be an MTR. And the AV team is like, guys, there's issues. MTR works good in some circumstances. Every tool has a purpose, but you're not going to use a hammer to screw in a light bulb. Like each tool has a different, as opposed to a, grippy thing. Anyway, you know what I mean? There's different tools for different uses, and MTR isn't the be all end all, and it's not going to be, no matter how much Microsoft wishes. So to me, I definitely see the tension because I live it every day in my company here.
I'll echo something that Dawn said, but I'll also add, she said every tool has a purpose, but horses for courses. One thing that the article mentioned was that, yes, with the video in this case, there are tensions between the needs of a large room and a small room, and integrators who want to put in a big system and Microsoft who wants to see simplicity, simplicity in their eye. One thing we have to remember, and again, I'll take the manufacturer's hat off for a second and put on a user's hat on. We have to remember, we have to design rooms that fit the purpose of the application, okay? Because the business team, the accounting team, when they meet, they do something different than when the marketing people meet and when the executive meets. There was an article not too long ago there you go. There was an article not too long ago, and I think it was even Gary Kay who was saying, look, my ideal meeting room would have multiple monitors so that people on both sides of the table can see everyone who's on the remote side. He's not far off there, but the reality is not every meeting room even needs that. We have to remember, what is the application? What is the purpose of us gathering here today? What do we need to do? Am I going to have a meeting with a contractor, a vendor. They're going to come in and show me their designs. They need to get that on the screen. That's not going to be something that's in the system that the MTR is going to be able to pull up. He needs to plug in, needs to show me what the product is going to look like, and we're going to move forward on it. Same thing, the accounting team is going to come together and they're going to talk about what does the quarterly numbers look like? Are we on schedule to close the quarter correctly, close the year correctly, that sort of thing. Completely different application. And then we still have those huddle spaces, those rooms. If God help us if we're still running with open floor plans, but if there's still open floor plans and people are needing to move into a private space to have a quick get together, that's a completely different room. There's your rally bar, no problem. Works great, gets the job done. Maybe another room needs to have the Microsoft front row where you need that 5K capability. Fine. Maybe the executive room is a show and tell, a fishbowl. We want to show the capability of the company and the prowess of the board, and they've got to have all the greatest toys, all the Shure or Sennheiser microphones overhead and all the rest. There's room for everything. The tension happens when we don't talk to the customer and ask them what they need. And, the manufacturers have to design the right stuff. The integrators have to design the right stuff. And the users have to be willing to say what they need and what they don't. And they have to have someone like Dawn on their team to help them decide what they need to put in those rooms based on her valuable experience of knowing how these things all work.
All right. That'll be a good place to stop. Dawn Mead, thank you, ma'am. How do people connect with you if they would like to?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dawn Mead. Most of the socials, either Dawn Mead or AV Dawn. And you can't find me on a website or a company because I'm not allowed to tell you that, but you might see me at some of the upcoming shows. So I know Simco has a regional show here in the DMV area coming up in May, and Infocom, of course, as always, is coming up in June. So hopefully I'll run into some of you there.
All right, very cool. Mr. Garth Lobin, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or at Lona?
Real easy on all the socials. You can find me on GC Lobin, right up to Blue Sky. You can find me on all of that. At Atlona, you can find me at garth.lobin@atlona.com. But like Tim, don't follow me. I'm almost as boring as he is.
I'm very boring. Mr. Fergali, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or with Midwich US?
Yeah, y'all can find me on LinkedIn, Tony Fergali. If you want to connect to my company, that's midwich.us. And then my email there is tony.fergali@midwich.us.
All right, very good. And Tony, just like the rest of us, will be hanging out with a couple of different trade shows coming up. I believe I get to hang out with Tony in Vegas for NAB here coming up in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And some yahoo named Chris Netto is going to be with us as well. So you can check us out there. Garth's not wrong. Don't follow me on any of the socials. If you would like to see some of my writings that have nothing to do with AV, you can check me out on LinkedIn. But beyond that, everything else is just me complaining about the Bears. But go by the website, if you would, please, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others. Mitchell has been very busy this week. We have a brand new AV Career Mastermind. Jen Weaver discusses the value of certifications, so you can check that out, as well as our coverage, quite frankly, of Enterprise Connect and NAB coming up in the next 3 to 4 weeks. For those of you watching on YouTube and you're done looking at my face, you can go just listen to us over on any of your preferred podcast catchers. If you're listening to us and you want to see what we all four look like, you can check us out on YouTube. So either way, go the opposite direction. But go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.